All right, it's time to jump right back into Jimmy Stein's countdown.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by Gametime, and I'll tell you about Gametime here in just a little bit. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Jimmy, we're going to jump right back into the countdown with number 67, Ty Lockwood, a tight end. Seems like we have 42 tight ends on the roster. We're recruiting 42 linebackers, so I guess that's where everything will even out. But it seems like we've got a lot of tight ends on the roster right now.
We do, and that's exactly why Ty is down here at 67, I think, which, we're moving up in the rankings, but, 67th on the team indicates that he's a guy who's likely not going to play a ton this fall, and that's probably the case. It has nothing to do with how good he might be. Let's remember, Ty is a young player. I think a redshirt freshman. So he's a young player. This is a developmental sport. It's a developmental position. And by no means is anyone down on Ty Lockwood. It's just that look who's in front of him. C.J. Dupree and Robbie Ouse are seniors who've played a ton of college football, and they are basically co-first team guys. And then you bring in a pass receiver like Josh Cuevas from Washington, who's going to be way up here in the rankings for a reason. Josh Cuevas is probably going to be the number one receiver among the tight end group, averaged like a whopping 30 yards a catch last year at Washington as a backup tight end. And then you even have Danny Lewis, Luke. Here's almost like a trivia question that most people will get wrong. Who started last season at tight end, first snap, game one? Danny Lewis. First snap, game one of the season, Danny Lewis was out there starting. And he did see some time with the ones the rest of the year, although it was less than Dupree and Ouse. And I think he'll play less than Cuevas, but Danny Lewis is still going to play with the ones. So if you got four tight ends ahead of you, I don't see a real reason to why we would expect to see a lot of Ty Lockwood, except maybe on special teams. But he is a good prospect. We have to remember this kid at one point was committed to Ohio State, which is another elite program. I mean, how many players in this country can say, well, I could have committed to Ohio State or I could have committed to Alabama? I mean, that makes you pretty elite in and of itself right there. And the thing I like about Ty Lockwood, Luke, is I think down the road, he's one of these guys that might be equally good as a pass receiver and as a blocker.
I think I'm getting to the point where the more random your last name is, the higher up the depth chart you are. Ouse and Dupree and Cuevas, and I mean, several of those. I bet you a lot of people couldn't spell any of those three.
Well, as someone that runs the message board at BOL, I can tell you there are a lot of misspellings of our players' names all the time. Maybe me, chief among them. Although I don't do it often because I try to be careful, and I know how all of it's spelled. But hey, sometimes my fingers move faster than my brain when I type.
One other thing that should be considered, and I know Caleb Odom has been moved to wide receiver, and that's where he's going to be, and he's actually been talking about it. But I can't help but think they might put him in the position of a tight end at some point, even though he'll be receiver, not necessarily at the end of the line, but maybe at the line spread out a little bit, something kind of funky. So in a way, I think if you're like, okay, I want somebody out there with the ability of a tight end who can catch, I mean, then Caleb Odom's probably going to be way up your list. So I think that also may factor into the amount of playing time he could possibly get.
I like you bring up Caleb Odom. I know it's not Caleb Odom Day. That's coming in a few days. But one thing about Caleb Odom, because he did recently do an interesting interview with the Crimson Tide Sports Network with Roger Hoover that I watched. And, here's what's interesting about Caleb's size, right? Caleb comes in and everybody in the world projects him to be a tight end. That was universal. He's ranked as a tight end, recruited as a tight end. He just gets to Alabama, and all of a sudden DeBoer and them watch tape of him practicing for the bowl because a lot of the freshmen showed up and practiced for the bowl game. And they're like, wow, this guy's got some twitch to him. He could stick at receiver if he wants to. And we don't have enough big receivers. That's what, there's a new scheme. There's a new offense. They like bigger receivers. All those Washington receivers that just got drafted were bigger guys. They like them big. So they went to Caleb Odom and said, hey, you wouldn't want to stick a wide receiver. And he's like, I'd rather play wide receiver than tight end. I've been a wide receiver my whole life. So my question is, and it's really rhetorical, although I'm interested in your opinion or anyone else's opinion about this, is Odom shows up, and for him to become a tight end, he had to work hard in the weight room over the next couple of years, right? He was a guy that was going to have to eat and lift his way to playing tight end because he was showing up about 215, 218. We needed him to get up to 235, 240 to play tight end. So he's going to have to eat and lift. Based on his frame and build, it almost seems to me, Luke, if he sticks at receiver, he's going to have to work equally hard staying at wide receiver size. Now we got to fight. Now I'm sure he'll lift, but instead of maxing out and adding bulk, he sort of needs to cardio work out and just stay at this 218, 220 sort of range at best, because you don't want him getting big and heavy, because then he has to move to tight end and he's not a weapon at wide receiver. You know what I'm saying? It's like he almost has to work equally hard staying where he's at, as opposed to, boy, he's going to have to work hard to gain weight to play tight end. You know what I'm saying?
I do. And it's sort of like, I don't know how much you watch The Office, but when Michael and Jan had their dinner party, which is one of the best episodes of the whole series. And at the end, they were having a fight about, and Michael said, well, you said you didn't want to have children, so I had a vasectomy. And then you said you might want to have children, so I had the vasectomy reserved. Then you said you definitely don't want children, so I had a vasectomy again. Snip, snap, snip, snap. You know, do you have any idea the toll 3 vasectomies has on a person? And it's sort of like telling Caleb Odom, hey, you need to gain weight because you're going to be a tight end. Wait a minute, don't gain weight. Quit gaining weight because you're going to be a wide receiver. No, be a tight end. No, be a wide receiver. You have any idea the physical toll that the weightlifting and weight loss takes on a person?
I think it's a weird analogy, but yeah, it's just like
it was just a way for me to tell that story.
It's just like that. It was that we planned this whole segue so Luke could tell that Office a bit. Now, I don't rule out, by the way, that Caleb will be a tight end down the road. I mean, I don't rule out that one day Caleb just grows into that spot, and there's nothing we can do to stop it because it's just growth. There's a reason, I think, why he was projected to be a tight end and why everybody recruited him as a tight end. So welcome to Caleb Odom Day that just squashed all over Ty Lockwood Day.
If you're Ty Lockwood, you're like,
hey, man, you going to talk about me?
About me, right?
Sorry, Ty. Ty is going to be a good player down the road, just like most tight ends. It's going to take a hot minute.
You know, it's sort of like you're having a conversation with your wife. You're like, yeah, you wanted me to open up a little bit. And then the next thing you know, 20 minutes later, all she's done is tell you all the things you still do wrong. You're like, is this about you or me? I don't even know anymore. All right, let's talk about game time.
Game time.
Boy, I hate that delay. I really do. But I love game time. I mean, look, I don't even have to use the live read for game time. That's why I love them so much. I mean, all these live reads, I love all our sponsors. But sometimes they have some tricky stuff you got to read. See, I've used game time so much, I already know about it. I got it on my phone. Easy to use app. It's super fantastic. Califragilistic. I don't even remember what that is. But it's awesome. Go check it out. Game time. Go get the app. And use code LOCKEDONCollege on your first order. You get $20 off. But look, and I know that $20 can be great, whatever. You really want to use it for ease. It's so easy. You can see where you're going to be sitting. You can see how things are going to look from your vantage point at that particular seat. And the prices are just the lowest in the business. I'm telling you, I've used other places. Very frustrating at times. Game time is not like that at all. Game time, customer service, top notch. Everything about them has been top notch. Love Game Time. Used them for World Series, NBA, college basketball, college football, pro football. Used it for everything. Go check them out. That's Gametime. Download that app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so let's get to number 66. This is an interesting one to me, a guy that was once committed to Texas in Hunter Osborne. I think he's a good player. I saw him some in high school. I liked him a lot over at Hewitt-Trussville. It comes from a program that puts out a lot of college kids, and excited about him. I mean, yeah, he's a little low on your list, I guess, but I mean, I think you got this one right, Jimmy. And until we see him perform, as you know, I can't really put him any higher than this, but I am high on him as a prospect eventually.
So many of these guys, including Ty Lockwood, because now we'll talk about Ty Lockwood during Hunter Osborne, just like we talked about Caleb Odom during Ty. But just like Ty, it's not a statement about where Hunter's game is or how good he might be. It's just depth at the position. That's why Ty was down here, and I think depth at the position is why Hunter Osborne isn't a little higher. The defensive line group has a lot of guys. I mean, I do think that there's a question mark in terms of maybe we don't have a true dude or two on the defensive line. That would be nice. But the number of players Alabama has on the defensive line is very strong. Off the top of my head, pretty sure this is accurate, we have 14 defensive linemen on scholarship for just 3 spots on the field. So you're almost talking about five players per spot, meaning you could have a 5th team guy, you know, and really there's no such thing as even a 4th team or a 5th team, but you have guys down there who are number 5, you know, at their position on scholarship. And so Hunter Osborne just has a lot of older, more experienced guys ahead of him. So I don't think we're going to see a ton of him this fall either. But that doesn't mean that I'm not really high on him. In fact, one of the things I'll say about Hunter that stands out to me is just his personality. This is a guy that we all need to root for, because it would be great if Hunter ends up being one of the faces of Alabama football, because he is extremely well-spoken. He is bright. He is likable. He's got a personality that I'm not going to say he's like, but he's like Tyler Booker. I think everybody hears Tyler Booker all the time, and everybody's like, wow, Tyler Booker's great. Hunter Osborne's that way. He just doesn't have the role on the team like Booker's got. But it's a role on the team he doesn't have yet. Again, what we just said about Ty, you know, there are some positions on the field, Luke, where it takes more time than others for the typical player. I mean, a lot of running backs can show up ready to play. Some wide receivers show up ready to play. Even some DBs show up ready to play. Certainly kickers show up ready to play. But there are some positions like offensive line, defensive line, and tight end where it just takes a while. I mean, because you've got to add significant strength, weight, muscle, mass, and then learn the technique, because that's a technique position, because you're playing again. You're sumo wrestling down there. And you've got to learn how to play with proper technique, because in high school, he could just squash people because he's bigger, faster, stronger than everybody played in high school. That doesn't work at this level. So it just takes a while for the non-freaks. Saban spoiled us with a lot of freaks that just showed up and they were ready to get off the bus and be Americans out of high school. We got spoiled by that, because that is not the norm. That's not how this typically works. That's just how it worked in Cyborg Saban's world.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, look, I'm excited about his prospects too, and I'm with you on the ambassador. You and I probably talk about that as much as any podcast, like guys who could be an ambassador for the program. Hunter Osborne comes from a good family. Good dude, come from a good program in Hewitt-Trussville that like is known to put out good people.
Malachi.
So I feel like eventually he can be. And you know, some people become leaders through it. Some people show up and they're the best player and they're also a good person. I mean, you know, just off the top of my head, Reggie White, you know, the Minister of Defense. He's a good person and he was also a badass. And so people paid attention to him from day one of everywhere he's ever been, because he just commanded their attention. Some people earn the respect through experience. Like they take their lumps and then they get in there and they figure it out. I mean, Reggie White was never going to, I mean, he was always going to be the best player on the field. Hunter Osborne, I think, is the kind of guy that he can be a leader like a Mac Jones. Mac Jones was that way to me. Different positions, I understand, but I mean, I think the same theory applies. So I'm excited about Hunter Osborne. And I feel like, hopefully he can contribute this year. I'm not predicting that, though. I'm going to say he and Lockwood, but not Caleb Odom. I think that two of those three will not contribute this year.
These are two kids today, Luke, that I hope don't lose some patience and just portal out and because they want to just play right now. I get it. I mean, I would get it. I wouldn't even be mad. I mean, you can't be mad. You'd get it. You're like, yeah, they just want to play. I get it. But the thing is, I'm 100% sure, 100% sure. Well, as sure as you can be in sports. I think Lockwood and Osborne will be really good players. It's just going to take a minute. I hope they're patient. And I hope they're good players at Alabama because they're both really good kids. They're Alabama kids. Osborne in particular is a bit of a gump. Lockwood's probably getting that way, even though he's originally from Memphis. I hope they stick it out at Alabama while they're waiting their turn because I think they're, it'll be, I'll be rooting for them at another place, but I'll also be partially sad when they're at another place and they're redshirt juniors and now they're really good players. Like, oh, you just stayed one more year, But in the transfer portal age, Luke, I think it's something that we have to discuss every now and then on this roster ranking countdown for kids that are this, at this spot on the list. It's like, I hope they don't lose patience because frankly, there's very few kids that I like. I mean, the only kids I ever want to see portal out or behavioral issues, frankly. I mean, once I signed with Alabama, I root for all of them.
I'm with you on that. So very quickly before we go to our next break, and then we're going to jump into some recruiting this weekend, just going to let you break down some of the dudes coming in that we haven't talked about in previous podcasts this week. Alabama did move up to number 2 in ESPN's way too early top 25 in basketball. Oddly, though, in their latest bracketology, they have Bama as a 2 seed. And the 1 seed in that particular bracket would be Houston. I just found that a little interesting.
How dare they?
You SOBs.
Isn't it hilarious? Isn't it funny how quickly we adjust to being North Carolina?
Yeah. Well, I mean, how quickly we adjust to being North Carolina, and then how unquickly and how horribly we accept the fact that occasionally we drop down to being, I don't know, Mercer. You know what I mean in basketball? I mean, so regardless. Okay. Then another thing, the kickoff time, I think we talked about this a minute, but the kickoff time for South Florida is set for 6:00, which is great. That means our first 2 games are in the nighttime arena. I mean, it's still going to be light, but I mean, it's fine. And it's still going to be hot, but it's not going to be 11 o'clock in the deadgum morning or 2:30, which would just, choke everybody to death. But so those are good, night kickoff games. And then, of course, that Wisconsin game, which it sucks, but it's at 11 o'clock. So be it. And I'll be there. So I'm looking forward to it.
The thing I love about those 6 o'clock kicks, just speaking for myself selfishly, everyone listening to the show has their own routine that they do on game days, and everyone's different and everyone's is valuable. And I know everyone out there listening to this is so looking forward to it. But for me, just the fact that when we kick off at 6, and of course I'll be going to both of these games, I can watch the other games. I can watch the 11 o'clock game. I can watch a 2:30 game. And enjoy other games because I'll be so excited that football's back, and it gives you a full day to even socialize or walk around and enjoy the day. A lot of people listening will be here tailgating, and that's great. But boy, bring some shade, bring a fan. It's going to be cool. It's going to be it needs to be cool in your tent because it's going to be hot outside.
I think that's great that you're going to the first 2 games because I probably won't go to the first 2 games. And so this works out great because that way I can do a reaction show and then you can just get in if you can. Yeah. And then you also get to have the experience of being there. And then for Wisconsin, I don't think you're going, right?
Not going to Wisconsin. Right now, I'm not going to any road game, but I will go to postseason games.
Well, we'll that way we can reverse it. If I can ever get you to learn how to use a computer, this is fantastic. So, Jimmy, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some recruiting. Did I say Cooten or Cruton?
I think you might have said Cooten, but I knew what you were talking about, which helps. I knew it.
He's the president of Russia, isn't he?
It's his cousin. Putin's the president. His cousin is Cooten.
Frank Cooten. Okay. So Jimmy got a big weekend coming up. Got some serious dudes coming in. You've already talked about them in some of the previous pods, but how about running down some folks that we haven't discussed?
Yeah, I mean, that's how it shows how big the recruiting weekend is. It's taken all week to discuss every single player that's going to be making an official visit. They're all good, and we're down to, I think, 4 that we haven't talked about. Charles House is coming this weekend. Interesting defensive tackle from Charlotte, North Carolina. Defensive line recruiting, as usual, garners a lot of interest, and people are like, who are they going to add? Who are you going to add? You already got Antonio Coleman. They probably want to sign 3. Josiah Sharma from California. That's one that I think Alabama leads on. That would be great. Charles House is making an official visit. To me, he is a strong maybe. I think he's a maybe on us, and we're a maybe on him. This weekend is a great time to get to know Charles House better on a personal level, watch the film with him, see where he might fit into us scheme-wise, see how he's a fit personality-wise. Pretty highly regarded guy. Right now, he's got a commitment date, by the way. He's going to commit June 22nd. That's what he's saying right now. And, it wouldn't be Alabama right now. But this is the weekend. Might it be Alabama? Tennessee is probably the leader for him. Again, from North Carolina. I think he likes North Carolina. I think he likes Georgia. I think he's going to visit over there. Interesting kid. I think right now it's just he's one of the mysteries of the weekend. Like, wow, how much do we like him? How much does he like us? Is there a chance Alabama can change his commitment plans, if not even push it off? Like, hey, well, maybe you can come back to camp. I mean, we'll see. That's one thing for people to know, because I think this gets some confusion. During official visits, kids don't camp. They camp sometimes on unofficial visits, or frequently camp on unofficial visits. But on official visits, there's no camping at all. But Charles House, one of the interesting kids this weekend, defensive tackle. Jaden Perlott from Georgia. Buford. There's one of our favorite Georgia programs, the Buford to Tuscaloosa pipeline. Jaden Perlott is a very good prospect. Not sure where we stand with him. He likes Georgia a lot, which is rare for the Buford kids. Georgia's had a problem recruiting Buford for a long time, and it looks like they're in good shape for Jaden Perlott. The thing with Perlott is he's a good player. Well, Alabama's got 4 inside linebackers already committed in this class: Sanders and Metz and Harmon from Georgia. Miles Johnson currently committed, but as I talked about here, I think is a likely flip somewhere else. But regardless, Perlott is, I think the situation with him is, how good is he worth making the room for? Is he worth another inside linebacker? Duke Johnson also committed to Alabama. How can I forget him? He might be the best kid committed in the class. So Alabama's sort of stacked at this spot, but Jaden Perlott is so good, it's worth kicking the tires on. 2 more quickly. Andrew Olish, a tight end from Pennsylvania, likes Alabama a lot, calls Alabama a dream school for him. But he's from Pennsylvania. He's visited Penn State 100 times. He's got future visits planned to Penn State. I think this is just going to be, is there any way to talk you out of Penn State? Because you seem to like Alabama a lot. You're a good player. But he seems tied into the Nittany Lions, and he's from there. Lastly, I'll save the best one for last, Luke, because this is the one that's most interesting, and Alabama's got a good shot here, or a shot. Ty Haywood. He is a 5-star offensive tackle. And do we have to even discuss how big 5-star offensive tackles are in the recruiting world? Ty Haywood is an outstanding J.C. Latham type prospect, frankly, or in that ballpark. I mean, he's just a really good premium blue chip offensive tackle. He grew up in Mississippi before moving to Texas, where he lives now, and says to anyone that interviews him, when I grew up, I was the biggest Alabama fan. I love Alabama. He is so excited to come to Alabama and look around. And as you know, Luke, he's going to get blown away on the visit. I mean, anyone that comes on the visit is just blown away by the Disney World that is the Alabama football building and the facilities. And I think he's going to love it. Now, the weird thing is, even though he's a big Alabama guy and he can't wait to be here, he's sort of already got a good relationship with other programs. Oklahoma may be the team to beat, and Oklahoma has a long history of recruiting the offensive line position really well, and Oklahoma recruits Texas really well. So Oklahoma's a team to beat, but here's a chance at a 5-star that Alabama would be kind of coming out of nowhere to get. But Ty Haywood is one to watch this weekend, and my hope is not that there's a surprise commitment, but maybe Ty Haywood comes out of this visit weekend going, hey, Alabama's going to be tough to beat. I've seen it now in my own eyes, and it lived up to my expectations, and Alabama's going to be tough to beat. So that covers it. I think that's all 12 now that we covered all week long.
You are a machine. I mean, a broken machine, a Tandy 2000 computer, but you are a machine.
I'm a machine that knows how to converse and talk and read with Andrew Bone and Joseph Hastings. That's at BOL. That's that's how. I mean, I've always known recruiting, but I've never known it better, thanks to my relationship now with professional relationship with Tim, Andrew, and JoJo. We call him old JoJo.
Tell them about it, JoJo. That's what.
Yeah, JoJo.
That's going to do it for today's pod. We'll be back soon. It's the weekend. Who knows? So we'll do that soon. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.